The question of human purpose, of why we are born just to die, is not a new one. This fact can easily be missed by the state of current discourse on existentialism. The popular narrative is that the 19th century dismantled the folly of religion with natural sciences. Darwin uncovered the origin of species, and people came to realize that humans are just another animal, not something unique or special. This post-Enlightenment society of cold rational thought destroyed our belief in God and led us towards atheism and nihilism. Without God as an explanation to our existence, we found that nothing has a solid foundation that our conception of ourselves can rest upon. Existentialism has come to be known as a depressing philosophy because it has failed to take up the mantle that God left behind. Instead of being a science of purpose and existence, existentialism has instead become a light shining on the fact that human existence has no purpose. Because of this popular narrative, we tend to think of existential dread as something that applies uniquely to our post-industrial age. This is obviously untrue. Reflecting on the brief time we have in life, the fact that everyone dies, puts into focus that we only have a limited amount of things that we can possibly do in life. That makes the question of what we should do and what is the best way to optimize the gift of life very important. These questions are a fundamental part of human life, with or without religion. We can see evidence of the universality of the existential feeling by its presence in the oldest written stories that we can find. Gilgamesh was a man at the beginning of human civilization who grappled with the idea of his eventual death. Achilles, hero of the Trojan War, was a man filled with existential angst. The idea that he would one day die filled him with such turbulent feelings of sadness and anger, it made him say that since he must die, he wished that he was never born at all. When Odysseus found him in the afterlife, Achilles says that he would rather be the slave of a slave than king of the dead. Surely, it is better to be alive than dead. This was known even thousands of years ago, in cultures that believed firmly in gods and the afterlife. Both Gilgamesh and the Homeric heroes found purpose in the idea of glory. They performed great actions that would be written about and repeated forever. This is a good existential purpose, but it is necessarily limited to a few people. After all, exceptional people are by definition a small portion of a larger population. The majority of people for most of history have been barred from existential purpose. This can perhaps be attributed to the fact that existentialism requires a certain amount of leisure to become an issue for a person. A man who is constantly toiling to stay alive has little time to inquire about the meaning of being. We can perhaps thank Rome for the introduction of this problem to the masses, for it was under their empire that existence of the common man began to be addressed. Christianity and Stoicism were both schools that were made by Roman slaves and put value on all life, both high and low. Both these schools have a core pillar of existential importance. With Christianity, it is closeness with God. The purpose of your life is to become as close with Him as you possibly can be. All actions and dogmas are derived from this prime motivation. Stoicism promised a life free of pain. Stoic virtues were a means to the goal of a painless life. A school of philosophy that was forged in the same fire as both Christianity and Stoicism is Epicureanism. The Epicureans believed that the sole virtue of life is happiness. The whole purpose of life is to maximize our happiness before we die. This school is much less famous than its brother, Stoicism, and its brother-in-law, Christianity. This is most likely due to its inaccessibility and its lack of self-aggrandizement. One of the core doctrines of the Epicurean school is a retreat from the world of fame, conflict, and politics. This is an obvious hindrance to its proliferation. The idea of glory is always attractive to exceptional men, and by its nature is a well-known purpose of life. Christianity has its doctrine of evangelizing, and always seeks to spread the word of Christ. Stoicism has no inherent nature that makes it promote its own proliferation, but neither does it hinder itself. Stoics run businesses, have kids, and run for office. This cannot be said of Epicureanism. Epicurus highly discouraged having kids. This very literally hinders the proliferation of this ideology. Aside from this, it requires wealth, but was unattractive to the wealthy. The school that Epicurus founded came to be known as the Garden, because Epicurus would host his disciples in a garden in Athens. There, they would have modest meals and discuss philosophy. He believed that removing yourself from broader society and living only among friends was a key to happiness. This requires wealth to buy a garden and to buy food for yourself and your friends. But if a person does this, they will ensure that they are forgotten to history, as they will have no kids nor any deeds that affect society at large. A good Epicurean has his path barred to glory. This makes the school inherently undesirable to the rich, who by the fundamental nature of nobility are people who want to visibly stand above others. I believe I have solved the Epicurean paradox by making the garden accessible to commoners like me. I will give a brief history of my own despair that led me to going down this train of thought. From a very young age, I was enamored with history and heroes. It seemed to me the glory in history was won on the battlefield. Watching History Channel documentaries with my dad, who was himself a veteran, made me see the military as an idol of manliness. It was my one goal in life to join the military, be in combat, and fulfill my childhood fantasy of being a hero like many men before me. When I came of age, my parents convinced me to go to college, which I did briefly before dropping out. It was simply not what I wanted to do. I enlisted in the Marine Corps, signing a 5-year contract that guaranteed me the chance to become a recon Marine. Apparently, at the time of my enlistment, they added a hearing test at boot camp. This was my downfall. I was found to have bad hearing, and after 3 weeks of living in San Diego, I was medically discharged from the Marine Corps. I was crestfallen. I moved back in with my parents and started to work as an electrician in San Francisco. Until this point in my life, I had existential purpose, even if the people around me found that purpose contemptible. After this point, I became a directionless wanderer. One place my wanderings led to was the work of Friedrich Nietzsche. I will admit, I did not have a solid understanding of his ideas when I first read his work. He is in large part a critic, and I had not read the works of the men that he was critiquing. Nonetheless, his ideas opened my eyes, and I began to see great value in philosophy. It was the ideas of the early modern period, people such as Kant and Descartes, that sowed the seeds in my mind that the world is not necessarily as it seems. This is, of course, one of the main criticisms Nietzsche had against all philosophers before him, that they created an imaginary world and gave it a higher status than the world we live in, the world of appearance. Certainly, Plato, Descartes, and Kant all hold the idea that the world we see is a product of our mind and not necessarily what is actually in existence. But the so-called other worlds that they created are completely abstract and not elaborated on. These ideas, along with their criticisms, put into my mind that our own world is a product of our own mind creating appearances, and that the world of appearance is what should matter to us. If this is the case, the next logical question is, how much control do we have over these appearances? Pleasure and pain are what bring us happiness and unhappiness. If pleasure and pain are products of the world of appearances, then being able to manipulate the world of appearances is what will put us in control of our own happiness. This is my Epicurean garden, the self. This requires no money for a garden, only the ability to turn inward and begin to explore the inner world. I have practiced lucid dreaming and out-of-body meditations enough to know that we can exist in a world created by our own minds, and in this world we are the center of existence. These worlds are not arbitrary things created by the uncaring hands of chance, but are crafted by your own mind and necessarily have an intimate connection with you. The issue that I have with my Epicurean garden is that it is hard to access. Epicurus would simply walk past some hedges and he would be in his garden. For me, it takes dedication, skill, and patience. Becoming lucid in a dream and remembering it is no easy task. Neither is having an out-of-body experience through meditation. These things require effort and specific knowledge to access them. It is my goal to use this channel to give guidance needed to reach your own Epicurean garden. I know many people find these ideas ridiculous, that playing with your own imagination has no real-world value, and in a way, that is correct. The story of humanity is the story of being more and more able to manipulate our environment and do as we please. Our earliest technology, tents, clothes, and fire, allowed us to live in environments that our bodies cannot survive in naked. Presently, the progress of civilization and technology has brought us to a point where we can travel across the world in hours, message people instantly, change entire landscapes, and manipulate the world to exist in a way that suits us. This can seem like the main goal of human existence because it is what we are constantly wrapped up in. When we go to work for 8 hours a day, it is not to bring satisfaction to the experience of our existence, but to advance the material wealth of ourselves and others. Whether it's done on purpose or not, most people dedicate most of their lives to advancing the power of civilization. And since it is plain to see that this is what everyone does, it can seem ridiculous when you decide to do something else. You can make yourself feel less ridiculous when you think about what life is. Before we are born, there is no experience. After we are born, we become conscious and experience the world for a brief time. When we die, we return to oblivion and have no experience. The question of existence is the question of what experiences are worthy of filling the brief time that we are able to have them. Your mind is where all these experiences come from, and is therefore where all existential importance comes from. If we define existentialism as the study of existence, then this science should be trying to discover the best and most worthy experiences that will bring us the most pleasure and happiness. It should not, as it does now, focus on the value of having experience at all. Every possible experience you have is a product of your mind. Therefore, the most joyous possible feeling is a product of your mind. If we learn to walk in the Epicurean garden, our wanderings will eventually lead us to happiness that is not limited by physical reality, and is something only our imaginations can provide us.